What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're in episode 5 of the LS swap, and we are about 15 days away from the day that this needs to be on a trailer headed to Jeep Beach. So, with that said, we have a lot to cover in this video and not a lot of time. Forgive me if it feels like we're jumping around a lot, but let's get to it. So basically the entire last video was about wiring, and I refuse to make another video about wiring right now. But I did want to show you guys this setup because this is basically how we're going to run the Jeep moving forwards. As you can see here, we have a switch panel from AuxBeam, and I will do a review on this guy in the future. But one of the things that I thought was really cool is that this actually comes with a start-stop as well as a power button. So those are actually going to be useful because at the end of our last video, I mentioned that we had one more wire that we needed to address. And that wire is this one. It's a 12 volt that needs to be powered during cranking. And the reason that that's important is because that is essentially what's going to serve as our kill switch for the Jeep. You see, if this doesn't have power, the Jeep isn't going to start. But if it's always on, then the ECU will also always be on. So my plan, if it's not already incredibly clear, is going to be to run that red wire to this power button. The switch panel itself is going to always be powered on. So this is going to be the true power for the ECU. And then we're probably going to wire the ignition up to one of these switches as well. Switch panels installed, all of the wires are ran. Went ahead and threw a couple of the stickers on the panel so that you could actually see what my plan is. As of right now, we will have the Terminator system running on the power button, start and stop, and the electric fan itself will also be powered from the switch panel. But I did want to give it a quick test and make sure that everything was right. So I'm gonna hit the power button for the Terminator, and we should see the screen come on over there. There we go. It's booting up. Obviously, we're still going to have to go through the setup for the Terminator system, but that's a proof of concept for us. So we're finally getting somewhere. One step closer to powering this thing up. The guys over at HighLift Offroad sent a custom fuel line that's going to connect to our stock fuel line system, back at the tank, and then up at the fuel rail on the LS. They're actually in the process of making a bunch of the little pieces that you're going to need to do this swap and do it correctly. So I do appreciate this. This is going in right now. HighLift uses an OEM style press-on connector for both ends of the line, and it's all press fitted, wrapped in heat wrap, and good to go. This was super easy. So that is basically completely plug and play, and now we've got fuel to get delivered to the rail. So yeah, once again, a big shout out to HighLift Offroad. There will be a link in the description to their Instagram if you guys are looking. If you guys are in the market and you don't want to spend a bunch of time actually building your own custom fuel lines, they've got it figured out. And in my case, time is really not on our side anymore. Jeep Beach is coming up very, very quickly. So yeah, I'd say it's definitely worth checking out. And for the record, the total time of install on that fuel line was like 20 seconds. That beats the heck out of trying to custom build AN fittings and steel hoses. So if it's good enough for OEM, it's good enough for me. That's gonna work really, really well. And now we can move back to the shifter. mounting the shifter might actually be a little easier than I thought it would be. I wasn't planning on using the shifter shroud that came with it originally. However, I think it's actually going to fit perfectly in place. So instead of making a bunch of brackets, this should do the job. I went ahead and screwed it down to the floor. It is nice and solid. Now we will actually run the shifter cable through that factory shifter cable hole, if you can see it there. And then finally, we'll be able to drop the shifter down into the top of it, bolt it down to the shroud, and reinstall the center console. So there we go. It actually sits down in there relatively nicely. Of course, I'm probably going to make some kind of cover to go around and fill in this area. But until we upgrade to an aftermarket center console, this is going to work just fine. And yes, I know the shifter is a little bit closer up here than I would like it to be, but there's plenty of room for a hand. So we are good to go there. Now we just need to hook it up on the transmission. Also, yes, I am well aware that my Jeep has turned into a literal trash can since I started this. And frankly, I just don't have time to go through and clean everything out. So we're just gonna keep on rolling. And if we get it done in time for Jeep Beach, I promise we'll give it a good detail. Got all the linkages bolted up. I added some heat shield to the shifter just in case. And I'm going to go back and tie everything away. But everything is all bolted up. I think that I did it right.
Nope.
We need to actually verify that right now. So I'm gonna leave you guys down here and I'm gonna go and give that a shot. So it looked like in that clip that the shifter was working just like it's supposed to. However, there was one pretty big problem, and it was that my orientation was wrong, and what I thought was park was actually first gear all the way at the back. So because the shifter cable is supposed to be aimed out of the back of the shifter itself, and I reversed it and put it out the front, so that means we also had to get a little bit more custom. And you guys have got to bear with me here, but as you can see, what I did was actually flip the linkage, and now it is running the proper way with park facing the top. So now as I push it back, the shifter will actually move in the same direction. However, it is reversing the order of the gears. But we got that squared away. And now it's time we start addressing the cooling system. So when it comes to cooling, there is a handful of bolt-on options. You could also possibly get away with using your stock radiator from the 3.8, but I'm not going to take a chance on that. I wanted to beef up the cooling system. So we went with a Frostbite 4-row aluminum radiator from Holley. This is gonna give us all the cooling that we need and also has built-in ports for transmission cooler. It does have the inlet and outlet ports both on the proper side for the LS, and the workmanship on this thing is just killer. Now, a radiator alone isn't going to do us much good while we're just sitting. So we went ahead and got the Frostbite shroud, and we picked up this Spall 16-inch fan. And the best part about it is just how slim this setup is. And that's a good looking cooling setup. So I went ahead and whipped up a couple quick brackets with the TMR Machete steel bender. The Machete from TMR is really, really awesome. It worked really well for this. I've got a cool idea to use that to make a mount for the Harbor Freight jack. So definitely stay tuned for that. That'll probably happen sometime before Jeep Beach. So I threw in some rubber isolators to make sure the radio was nice and secure. And we have room for days. And one final touch for the radiator, this awesome Frostbite cap cover. We got the radiator in, and I've spent a good amount of time trying to track down hoses for the coolant system. I went ahead and test fitted this ginormous intake and filter, and I don't know for sure if this is going to be where it stays. We may end up making this curve down a little bit more. However, I wanted to get it in place and see how it looked. Now, one thing that we didn't talk about, but I've been kind of keeping it in the background, is this guy. And this is a 400 amp JS Alternators custom alternator. I remember we used to talk about upgrading the alternator way back in the day with YJs and TJs, but it seems like that has kind of left the realm of what we're doing for modifications nowadays on some of these newer Jeeps. That should stop. You see, with all these fancy lights and all the aftermarket goodies that we throw on our Jeeps, we really should be treating them to appropriate power. And that's where JS Alternators comes in. JS built this beautiful custom powder coated 400 amp self-excite alternator for me because the Holley Terminator system doesn't come with an alternator plug-in. So we needed this to be able to turn on automatically, which this one does. And they also threw in a big 3 kit so we can make sure that all of this power is getting right back to the battery. But if you think this alternator looks good in here now, just wait until you see it in the light. You can't tell me that that alternator is not sick. But with that, guys, you are all caught up with where I am right now on the build. I will have another video for you soon where we're going to tie up some of these loose ends and hopefully, just hopefully, get this thing fired up for the very first time. I'll see you then.